Be the right club. Be the right club today. Yes!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Be the Right Club Today podcast. I don't know if there's a day that goes by, and for sure a week that doesn't go by, that somebody doesn't come into the academy and ask if we've seen the latest video produced by our next guest. They've been producing some of the best online content for the last 4 or 5 years that the golf instruction world has probably ever seen. Two of the best instructors in the world. I'm super pumped about having our next guests on, the guys from Athletic Motion Golf, Mike Granato and Sean Webb. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
Sean, it's been a while since I've seen you. You've been busy.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, we've been busy. I miss those days picking your brain out there at the golf academy.
Well, I didn't have much to allow. You knew a lot more than I did.
I just usually ask questions and sit back and listen.
Yeah. So I saw this morning y'all's post was lead arm compared professionals versus the amateurs. Yeah, we could start with that. What do y'all say? What do you think?
Yeah, there's a definite distinct difference in how those two groups of golfers move that lead arm for sure. Now, I'd be curious to get your thoughts if that's something that you've ever considered while you were playing and building your swing, or was that something that was just kind of involved in your movement pattern from the get-go?
It was kind of natural. I did what I did, and I saw a lot of different people do it a lot of different ways. Curtis Strange won 2 U.S. Opens with his left arm bent. And, so I was curious to know what y'all, to see what y'all posted about that.
Yeah, the bending of the left arm, I think, is what most golfers that certainly we come in contact with often think about. Like they feel that the arm's got to be dead straight to have a good golf swing. And as you mentioned, it's rarely the case. I mean, when you can measure it on gears, you can see the distinct differences, but there's always been in that left arm, both backswing and downswing.
So do you guys think from a width standpoint, I see a lot of guys come in here and they're trying to max out width, and a lot of times they'll over rotate shoulders, they'll move off the ball, they'll do a bunch of funky stuff just due to range of motion issues. Are you guys okay with allowing arms to fold a little bit, trail arm fold a little bit more at times, even left arm allowing it to fold a little bit? Obviously Hal's left arm was soft. He mentioned Curtis Strange, some of that versus this maxing out tension and trying to get as much width as we can get.
Yeah, we have a real simple kind of barometer for that. If the golfer has a hard time talking when they're in that position, that's not usually good. and you'll hear them lose their, like, right there's where I want to be. And that's not good typically when you're at that kind of range of motion and stressing the body to that point.
So don't you think as we age as well, our lead arm cannot stay as straight? Because I know right now my left arm bends a little bit whenever I play, but when I was young, it didn't. So,
right. Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, if you're going to kind of divide everybody into straight armed or soft armed, I think you'll see the 15 and under group definitely have the straighter arms than the 55 and older group for sure.
Right.
Sean, what are your thoughts on the downswing as far as passive arms versus active arms?
We get this question a lot, and I think it just depends on the player that's in front of you. You got guys that are leaving the arms back too much and trying to turn. You got guys that are pulling down too much. So I usually just take the player that's in front of me and try to figure out what they need. I guess we don't have like a hard rule on that.
Do you think that better players don't really want, a lot of them don't like the feel of active arms, but as we know, and you guys do so much good stuff with gears, the arms aren't just along for the ride. They're firing along pretty fast and moving pretty fast. Is that something that, the better player doesn't like it, but maybe their arms are trained, or doesn't like the feel of like trying to blast arm off chest a lot of times, but they've almost got trained arms to where they can feel the, let's say, the Genghis move of trying to keep the arms up and back, but they still have fairly fast arms and they're getting it back out in front of them a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of good players probably don't like to feel their hands and arms, especially down by the ball. But using gears, you get a pretty good barometer of what they think they're doing versus what they're doing. So if we see somebody doing that and we need to get them to lower the arms, or even with a good player, you can give them ways to feel like the arms are lowering without being really overactive, I guess.
Mike, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's really one of the differences in good players, right? Is they've learned how to do that. Like when you're young and you're dropped off at the golf course and you're, killing time and you go over to the practice green or the chipping area and you try to hit all these shots, you're training yourself how to use your hands and arms, sometimes subconsciously. And, that's a skill that you don't want to have as a conscious thought from what we hear from these great players. Now, the guy who's just picking up the game, maybe when he's in his 30s or 40s and he's retiring in a couple of years and he's wanting to play better golf, he hasn't learned those skills yet. So for him to be passive with arms that really don't know what to do can be a dangerous deal. So you usually kind of see guys that fall in one of those two categories.
So I feel like I'm compelled to chime in right here. I grew up with Jimmy Ballard and connection, and he definitely did not like separation of the arm from the body. And it's one of the reasons why I felt like I swung what most people would have said was pretty slow. I mean, I couldn't travel any faster than my body could rotate, basically. And, it's funny because before I met Jimmy Ballard in college, I was one of the longer hitters in college at the time. I met Jimmy Ballard and I became much shorter, but probably some would say more consistent in terms of accuracy. In learning how to teach and convey what the golf swing does to others, I've recognized now that the arms are a big part of the golf swing, and you better use them, because if you don't, you won't see the PGA Tour going forward because you won't have enough speed to hit it far enough. And Thank you. Yes. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just true. And, I almost feel like I'm being defiant by saying that. But the truth is, I'd like to go back and do some of the things that I know now, but Father Time's caught up with me and I can't do that. So,
Hal, I've got a great question for you. Or in my mind, it sounds great. If you were having to go back, you could take yourself when you were just starting and developing as a world-class player in today's game, would you put your emphasis in different areas? You mentioned that you kind of lost distance in favor of accuracy. Would you change how you did that, knowing how today's game is played compared to, hitting persimmon clubs and balata balls?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't function in today's world if you're not long. Not the way this tour is headed right now. I mean, whichever tour we're talking about right now.
Yeah, any tour now.
Yeah, any tour now. I mean, but you've got to be long. I made a statement 5 years ago that if my son came in and said, I want to learn how to play, I'd give him 5 wood and say, learn how to hit that low. What does that do? That makes your arm faster and gets shaft lean. And those are things that y'all see. I know you see it in a modern day golf. Launch angles lower. That's why they hit it so far. I mean, the shaft lean and their arms are making a 5-iron out of a 7-iron, really.
Yeah. It's certainly guys who we've seen have been fortunate enough to capture now on the Champions Tour. You can see some of them have gone through the effort of trying to morph what they were really good at, and you can see kind of the overlap of the two. But there's definitely benefit, and like you said, getting those arms moving faster if you want to make the game easier for yourself, because they don't set the courses up anymore to favor that short and straight guy as much.
Straight doesn't matter near as much as it used to. And I mean, that's one of the things that, I'm kind of glad I grew up in the era that I did, because, we had to curve the ball a little bit. We had to learn how to flight the ball a little differently than they do right now, because the ball spun more. We had to make sure we could keep the ball down into the wind. One of the things that guys don't see today is the hardest shot in the game is a 130-yard shot where the wind's blowing into you 25 miles an hour and you got to flight it down. And that ball it doesn't spin up like it used to. You know, that was a hard shot. You get to Augusta on 15 and you had to lay up. You better be careful with that shot.
What in the world did you do on 12 with that equipment?
Well, prayed. I mean, aimed it at the middle of the bunker all the time. I mean, I can't say that I ever hit a shot on the 12th hole that I knew I had the right club in my hand.
Wow.
I mean, you don't know. You hope.
Yeah, get educated hope, I guess, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So you guys you should have patented the term recentering. I know you guys have joked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, it was lots of tilt, lots of reverse C, lots of for right-handed golfers, right shoulder low, right side bend, all that stuff. And that's kind of a good player issue. Too much tilt. Most of the bad players, most of your high handicappers need a little bit more of that. But so I want you guys to talk a little bit about this recentering move, and specifically for now, I want you to talk about how it differs for different ages. Do you see earlier recentering with juniors versus a later recentering with older golfers? Do you see it all about the same? Do we want certain amount of pressure, certain amount of weight forward at certain times? Like, kind of go into this recentering move that you guys talk so much about.
The video I'm editing right now is on that same topic, so this is fresh in my mind.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think, and you can kind of boil this down also into kind of more of the 3/4 and half shots. The shorter the swing, so to Hal's point about, you know, aging and the swing getting shorter, there's less time to make a big move to the right and then recover and get to the left in time. So we like guys to favor what's going to happen in the downswing more than what happens in the backswing. But in general, there's a small shift away. You know, let's say if you start 50-50 with your pressure, there's 70-75% for like a regular full mid iron, and then somewhere near 50-50 at the top, and then somewhere near 70-75% by around left arm parallel in the downswing. And then from there, we don't like it to move much into impact. So it kind of has time to stabilize. And that we've got guys in their 80s that we teach that to, as well as, you know, kids in their teens, early teens that we teach that to.
So if you have guys that, this is kind of a tough question, but if you have guys that struggle with that recentering move, let's use Hal as an example, because Hal and I have been talking about this move for a while, and he's got 2 artificial joints in his left side, his left hip and his left knee. And he'll hit it really good and get to 60-40 front foot at, say, P5 at left arm parallel. With guys like that, say with guys with limitations, where are your tolerances? Do you allow them to, do you still try to nudge them forward? Somebody that hasn't really done that hard? Like when do you say, you know, talent takes over and you let them be who they are? Or when do you kind of force them into more?
The numbers are by and large arbitrary. The ones that I mentioned were kind of where we see most golfers fall into.
You just want to see kind of the pattern of a little back
Right.
and forth.
The timing of it more than anything.
Okay.
Yeah, the numbers are arbitrary. And, you know, if I did 60-40, I might not hit it as good. If Hal did 80-20, he might not hit it as good. So you try to find that range where the player hits it the best from, because that's still the goal, right? Hit it the best. And then you work on the timing of that so they can repeat it and repeat it and repeat it.
And from a timing standpoint, you're kind of preaching by left arm parallel. We want close to max pressure for a mid iron, and then from there it kind of cruises. It can go a little bit forward or kind of hang on or go a little bit back, but you don't want a ton of movement from that first move down in transition.
Yeah, and max is always going to be around impact. With an iron, driver is a little bit different, but with an iron, max will usually be around impact. And then we always use the 10% rule. So if you how's 60-40 at P5, we'd want to see that around 70 at impact. We wouldn't want them to be 90 at impact.
Okay, you don't want to.
We don't want that big movement from that, because you're only talking about 0.08 seconds from there to impact. You just don't want a lot of movement in that time frame.
So how do you, a lot of times we'll get guys that come in that are YouTube and social media guys that are self-teaching, and they see a lot of this recentering move. How do you guys keep from, we'll see a lot of guys that overdo it and they'll get their head kind of creeping a little bit too far forward. They'll almost recenter too much. Do you guys see that much? And how do you fight back against that? What are some of the things you do to rectify that?
What do you see, Sean?
Yeah. If you have someone come in that's doing it too much with the upper body, I think people get some confusion there. We try to get them to do a little more with the lower body. If I start seeing somebody try to do it this way, I'll get in behind, or kind of get their hips going under them more, as opposed to doing it with the upper body. It usually cleans it up pretty quick.
So you guys' goal would be head motion fairly quiet, and we're doing it a little bit more, say belly button down, and kind of filling the shift, feeling kind of you're squashing the bug in transition, kind of pushing down left side versus necessarily like moving your whole mass or your whole upper body forward to go get it.
Right.
Yeah. You guys have the force plates there, so you know how difficult it is to keep that little pressure ball still. So it's the pressure moves really fast and really easy. Most golfers who don't have access to that or haven't been on one yet will often equate the mass movement around a bunch. That'll move pressure, but it also, creates other issues with the mass. So the pressure movement's actually way more subtle than most golfers can appreciate sometimes when they're trying to learn that.
Your thoughts, because we've grinded on this a little bit.
Wow. I used my upper body a lot whenever I was young. We're sitting here talking about this, I came from the Jimmy Ballard camp where, you shifted into your right side pretty hard and you recentered. Obviously you recentered with rotation and arms not passing the body. And, staying still over a shot was late in my life. I mean, compared to what I did before. And I was never staying still, but, the pressure plate has confused me, to be honest with you. This whole teaching thing has confused me as far as my golf game is concerned. I mean, I kind of know what I want to do with someone else when they come in here, and then I'll get up over a golf shot and I'll think, well, what am I supposed to be thinking here? And, I think I'm a player. I always have been a player, and I need to think like a player rather than a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you didn't ask me this, Chase, but I mean, this has really caused me to not to want to play anymore. And, I'm not sure that's a good thing for Hal Sutton. So, I love the game.
Well, you've probably never
do y'all suffer from the same thing? I'm just curious.
We actually,
go ahead, Mike.
Sean.
I don't. I've gotten to the point now, I guess, just looking at so many swings and working on my own swing quite a bit, that I enjoy it now. And I understand what I want to do and what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's actually given me a lot of clarity.
Oh,
so
really?
I'm hitting the ball. Yeah, I'm hitting the ball better now than I ever have. Obviously, I'm not Hal Sutton, but I've hit it fairly good for someone who doesn't play that much. And I don't have to hit a ton of balls anymore to be pretty consistent. So it's actually, I feel like it's helped me. I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. We've talked to other guys, especially during the lockdown, who, great players who were helping guys at the club and kind of, teaching during that lockdown because there wasn't much else to do. And they echoed exactly what you said, Al. Like, this is not good for my golf game. To go from player to instructor. I mean, if you spend more time instructing, I guess it's easier to do it. But
that's a good point.
Yeah, like I don't have the burden of being a world-class player. So it's only been skill for me.
I can go out and have fun.
Well, I don't have that burden anymore myself, but I will tell you this: when you've been a really good player in your lifetime, to accept mediocrity is very difficult to do, and so that's something for everybody out there that's really a good player to think about. As you age, Father Time will catch up with you. You will not be able to do what you used to be able to do. And learning how to be satisfied with that will be difficult when we've been on the train of never being satisfied and always looking for better.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it in other sports, right? Like, how many NFL quarterbacks retire thinking their skill for dissecting defense is the best it's ever been. Just the body doesn't move as fast as their brain does. And, it's Father Time, undefeated.
Yep, undefeated.
One of the things too regarding, you guys' comments about playing and Hal's comments about playing and teaching, I think some of it has to do with, like a Justin Rose or a Tiger per se, or even like let's use Bryson DeChambeau, for example, very technical, diving into every little piece of golf swing. Those guys will be okay giving some golf lessons here and there, but like Dustin Johnson's never going to sit on the lesson tee giving golf lessons. He thinks fade and it fades. He thinks draw and it draws. And some of these guys that were just naturally talented and never really had to think about it. Like that's how and I've talked about that a lot. When he started teaching a little bit, it was like getting into his mind, like, okay, what is exactly going on? And I think you definitely have to turn that hat off at times when you're, trying to go play versus trying to go practice, or versus teaching. I want both your takes on this. What's one issue? Actually, let's go a different route. What's you guys' favorite kind of video or favorite concept that you guys have shared? And this might be kind of a tough question to answer. It's kind of like asking which one of your children is your favorite, but what are you guys most proud of? And I want both of you guys' answers on it. Like, what is it, the recentering that you guys have kind of come up with? Is it, some of the stuff, some of the visuals and diving deep into what gears can offer and what's really going on in 3D? Like, what are you guys most proud of?
Good, Sean.
Probably the pros versus AMs concept that we came up with a lot of years ago. That was like our first video that really hit it. It was a real simple video that we did on rotation, showing how the amateur kind of stood up and really extended, and then the professional player rotated through the shot and kind of stayed in his angles. And I think I did a quick voiceover, and it ended up doing really well. It made it to Golf WRX and stayed up there for weeks and weeks. And I think Mike and I just thought to ourselves, wow, this is something that hasn't been done before. And we're able to show real data instead of kind of just guessing. And it resonated with people. So probably for me, it's the pros versus AMs video series that we came up with.
Yeah, I would think it's, on a personal level, it's anything that I wasn't aware of or didn't know or even thought was the opposite of what actually happens. Like we did a couple shoulder videos in the pros versus AM series with how the right shoulder moves. I just never knew. Like, I could see golfers get into these positions, but I had no idea, of how the scapula moved and how the collarbone, the only attachment to the body the shoulder has is at the collarbone. I'm not an anatomy expert, and I had no idea about that. And it's made all the difference with adding shoulder rotation to golfers. We talk about aging golfers, and that's kind of our wheelhouse. Guys come see us when they're, seems like, over the age of 50 more than young guys. And it's helping them find another 30 degrees of shoulder rotation just by showing them how the shoulders move. And it's like a magic trick. But we had no idea until we did that deep dive into the video. So that to me is always the fun part, is those kind of light bulb moments.
So for those guys listening right now, most of them are listening on their phone or their car, in their car or whatever. So they can't, a lot of them won't see this. Some of them will. What's a little trick for them to help gain a bit more shoulder rotation? Just kind of, if you can describe it, give us a little bit of a quick rundown.
Yeah. So the golfers that we see, and myself included, the idea is that the shoulders and rib cage, the upper body turns as one unit, like a block of wood, and it doesn't. Like when you address, your shoulders roll forward, in the scaps, they roll forward at address just to put both hands on the club. In the backswing, the trail shoulders got to retract as the left one keeps protracting, keeps extending. So that, for a lot of golfers, that's an extra 30 on top of their chest rotation. Now, what most guys will do is keep both of those shoulders, like you were talking about earlier with that width, will keep both shoulders rolled forward. And that's a big restrictor to rotation. So just by changing that little concept and pattern, I mean, that's an instant 15 to 30 degrees of shoulder rotation.
So if I'm listening correctly, so the idea would be max out chest rotation first, and then it's going to feel like right shoulder by itself moves closer to the target from a maxed out chest rotation position versus obviously just moving it independently without chest rotation. And
I would say maxed out scares me. I would just say comfortable. And
Okay.
If you do like a Frankenstein deal where you just do that with your shoulders, that's independent of my chest. And that's all that's happening in the back.
Right. Got it.
So the trail arm, then, if you can go ahead and move the right shoulder further for the right-handed player, the trail arm won't get as narrow that way. Is
That's
that
exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to feel like you're kind of pushing away with your right arm. That keeps
So-
it wide and the right shoulder goes back.
so? For those that are listening out there, sometimes they think it's an independent movement of just the trail arm narrowing, but sometimes it's got no choice if the right shoulder won't go ahead. I mean, I think that's an interesting point for everybody out there listening right now.
That you're 100% correct. 100%. And that when that trail arm overly bends, I don't know if y'all can see that, that tends to pull the shoulder forward.
Right.
It's kind of
Like a
catch
magnet.
22. Yeah, and you can get golfers to think about the right arm as kind of pushing away. Sean always does that in lessons, like you're pushing away with the right arm, or think of, less, like there's a number of different ways. Everybody learns a little differently, but the concept of this shoulder rolling forward is going to shut down your rotation and make you narrow.
On that point, where do you guys feel for let's call it opportunity for more speed? Are we looking for longer backswings? Or are we looking for shorter backswings?
I really think it depends. Depends on
Yeah.
the player. Yeah.
It really does.
If a player, a real common one is a player like Hal was just describing, super narrow arms, super bent arms to make a longer backswing. That's not really adding speed to their swing. So you can get that player. The phrase we use is big shoulder turn, short arm swing. So you can get that player to turn the shoulders more, add 25 degrees of shoulder turn and a wider arm. He's going to feel like it's a shorter arm swing, but he's going to hit it farther because he's got the width now to generate the speed rather than just trying to cast those arms off his body. That's a really common scenario.
What's one issue you'd both like to never have to see again? A common swing flaw that you'd like to eradicate from all the golfing world?
Sean, go ahead.
And probably we've been talking about it here for a couple of minutes, but when Mike and I give a lesson on gears, almost the number one thing we go to is that narrow right arm. Like it's all every time we're thinking, hey, how's his right arm look? Because there's so many guys that come in. 90% of them probably have a too narrow of a right arm at the top, and that's kind of low hanging fruit. I think everybody would play better if that trail arm worked a little bit better.
I'd go back to the first one, Chase, is passive arms.
There you go.
That's my work in 3D. Like we didn't see it at all. I mean, the people that's how Hal and I kind of got started talking about golf swing was fast hips and slow arms. And especially with the younger crowd, for sure. Like they're gone. The arms are so slow. And that's what scares me. Our friend Monty Scheinblum and I talk about this all the time. Like people that try to keep their arms up, for what we see and hear, it causes a lot of issues, a ton of issues.
And we get rid of that real quick if they come in trying to do that.
And if you reverse engineer that, the arms have to generate speed very quickly in the downswing to increase club head speed, because that's got to happen by around waist high, a little bit before waist high, when the hands are moving the fastest. Then the hands slow down and that transfers to the club. If you're waiting to do that or being passive out of the top to do that, like it's less than a quarter of a second. You can't just turn that switch on down by the bottom.
It's tough. It's really tough.
So this leads me to, before we had cameras that we have now and 3D and everything else, just watching somebody swing, the guys that looked like played the best were the guys that had a smooth transition. And we tell somebody, okay, we got to speed your arms up. They think right out of the transition, you got to start speeding your arms up. So what do you say to somebody like that?
Yeah, smooth to me is an indication. Like I remember, growing up, Ernie was my favorite golfer because we basically the same height, and it looks so smooth and slow even on TV. And then the first time I stood next to him when he was hitting the ball, they're like, there's nothing slow about this. But that efficiency and that sequence makes it look very smooth. And when you take a player that doesn't have that sequence and then get them to move fast, it looks like maybe they're trying to kill a snake or something, compared to that sequencing, I think smooths it out.
Right.
So in a perfect world, let's talk top of backswing, first move down. Do we want a little bit let's talk what the lead arm is doing. Do we want a little bit of stretch first move down till about to really about the position that you guys talk about, where the pressure, where we're kind of recentering. So where we want pressure left, it's about left arm parallel in the downswing. Do we want a little bit of stretch? Do we want a little bit of say quiet arms to that point, and then from there, kind of all hell breaks loose? How would you guys describe what's gears showing?
It shows the hands moving faster than any other segment, 3 to 10 frames into the downswing. So still fairly high up. Now you're comparing it to the other segments, so nothing's really moving that fast right out of the top. And
so
then
I guess my question is, and it's kind of the house point, what about the guys that throw really hard and like you've got a ton of casts this way?
Yeah, so they're straightening the right arm out.
Yeah, and so it could be, go back to like Sean's point of the right arm's too bent, but like let's say just solid backswing, but then it's just completely thrown away. There's no lag at all, let's say.
Yeah, so this is a good topic actually.
Or just a concept issue.
Yeah, the arm's got to lower as it straightens, or you will ruin all that.
Almost like a yo-yo. They haven't been taught to lower the arms. They're just throwing it like that.
So the arms come down, and if they still kind of toss the wrist out, are you okay with maintaining some wrist angle stuff? Like that's kind of it seems to be a no-no with a lot of the new age instruction. You're trying to cast it away.
They have to.
Yeah.
You know, if they're dumping it too much, I'm going to help them feel what it needs to feel like. We always go back to, we just teach the person that's in front of you. You know, there's no like perfect way that everybody has to do it. If you come to me, I'm going to teach you a little different than the next guy.
So you guys find that with all your video content, that's hard to do sometimes? Like, and I don't mean that in a personal setting lesson, but I'm saying like, you're almost throwing this video out like it works for everybody. You know what I mean? Like that's, to me, that's hard, because when somebody comes in, we're exactly like you guys are, Sean. Like if I've got to get somebody to load it as hard as they can, I'm going to do it to help them. If I got to get somebody to throw it as hard as they can, we're going to teach them that. But with the video stuff, do you ever find like you send out a video and it's like a bunch of people try it that they didn't need it? They didn't need any of that.
It could be, you know, the videos we try to use just to give them good general concepts. You know, if they want to dive in more, they're struggling with it, we have a lot of ways that they can work with us, whether online or in person. But we feel like the videos are doing a good job at just giving overall good concepts about the swing, and that's half the battle.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah, Chase, I think the hardest thing to do when you're working on your golf swing yourself is to accurately diagnose what you're doing, right? Because I mean, it's over before you feel it, really. So you rely on video, or you rely on, even worse, what your buddy's telling you, right? And trying to self-diagnose is hard enough, and then trying to do it accurately is even harder. And we always ask, it's one of the fun questions that we get to ask golfers when they come in is, okay, what have you been working on? What do we need to clean up in this hour? What would make you a better golfer in this hour? And what they think it is rarely the calls. Like they may see the flip at impact, but it's hard not to flip at impact if you have to flip to try to hit it to the target, because you'll just hit it worse. So yeah, and that's why we're real heavy on the concepts in our videos rather than the actual how to. Because if you can learn the right concept, hopefully that'll keep you in kind of a narrow pattern of what you try to do, and then the mechanics there kind of start to clean up.
Yeah, we like to say that the flip is your brain trying to help you. It's
exactly right.
Not the fault.
It's doing you a favor.
Yeah, that's right. So, all right, you guys identify an issue to work on. One of the questions we get all the time, and I think it's very fascinating, is, okay, how do we practice? And this is such a loaded question, and there's so many steps to this, but what do you guys say? How do we take it from the lab? You guys teach in a kind of a lab setting like we do. How do you take it from the lab to the range, from the range to a round, a twilight round by yourself, to a money game, to a tournament, and so on and so forth?
So the first thing is you have to realize it's not going to happen tomorrow, right? The guy that comes and sees us for a lesson on a Thursday, and he's got his big money game on Friday, and he's mad because we get a call Friday night like, hey, I just lost $200 because what you showed me didn't work, right? It's not going to transfer that fast if you're making a serious movement pattern change. So going slow enough, one, to be able to feel the difference, and then practice the difference, and then take that, like you said, outside, because then, okay, now alignment, ball position, all those things typically change when you get out of the four walls of of a square room. Now, okay, if I've got Adam Scott swing and I keep aiming 50 yards to the right trying to hit target, it's not going to look like his swing for very long. So you've got to introduce all those scoring skills and then repetition, repetition, repetition. But you got to have feedback if you're going to practice outside.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, everybody has a phone. Just take the time to set up your phone for one thing. Put a couple alignment sticks down so you know where you're aimed. Set your phone up face on and down the line so you can actually take a look at what you're doing instead of just guessing. Because like we all know that what you're feeling and what's real usually are miles apart.
Block practice, random practice. Any thoughts on that?
I typically like doing the block stuff, the mechanics indoors, when you don't always have the distraction sometimes of the ball flight. Is if you're changing something, like if you're getting rid of that flip, it's not always going to be pretty the first few times you do it. But if you've got all your buddies around and they're laughing at you, dribbling them off the tee, you're probably going to bail on whatever it is you're working on.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Kyle, thoughts?
Yeah, well, I always did a lot better if I was working on something to go out and do it by myself rather than get the peanut gallery's comments on it. Jackie Burke told a story a long time ago that Hogan was shot 66 and was leading the tournament. And Jackie said, I shot 69. I was leaving, and the only guy out on the range was Hogan. So he said, I thought, well, he's leading the tournament and still practicing. I'm going to go out there and see what he's working on. And he changed his grip, and he topped 2 in a row. And Hogan said, Burke said, what are you working on? And he said, none of your business. And he said, I noticed he was doing something with his hands. He said, so you're working on a grip change? Yeah. So the next day, he said he shot 67. Hogan did. And he said, did that grip change make it to the first tee? He said, no, it's not ready yet. There you go. Even one of the best players that ever lived and swung a golf club couldn't get it from there to the first tee in 24 hours.
Exactly right.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it was about 3 years ago, a guy come in about 3 weeks before the playoffs started, and he was with us for 3 days, and the change he was making, he could only feel at about, there's a 9-iron he hit. Normal 9-iron, I think, was 160. He was making 40-yard 9-iron swings for 3 days, 8 hours a day. That's all he did, just to feel. And then he goes like, I know this isn't going to be ready for the playoffs. And he was still working on it in the spring. But it's that mindset, I think, really separates some of the success you're going to have in making a swing change.
Absolutely. You have to feel it first. You have to get it at a speed you can feel it, and then you slowly rev it up to where you can. One of the things, I don't remember who said this. I think it might have been John Dunnigan, said he likes to get players to say 9-iron at 160 stock. Figure out, so is it a half wedge? Can you hit it a half lob wedge distance first? Okay, we're going to live at half lob wedge, and then it's a full lob wedge, then it's a half pitching wedge or sand wedge, and it kind of progresses up. And I kind of love that little visual of like you're just incrementally stepping it up until it's close to full speed.
Yeah, that's a great one.
What are your guys' thoughts on wrist angles? There's a ton of players chasing Dustin Johnson and John Rahm flexion. There's, back in the day and Hal's day, most of the tour players were a little bit extended at the top. Like, where do you guys, again, I know I'm asking you specific questions about how you handle situations, but I just kind of want your overall general take on like wrist angles. Where do you guys fall on that line?
Still the norm is slightly cupped at the top, which what would look like kind of flattish, right? And then, there's more guys obviously in the top 10 probably than ever who have, the really bowed left wrist, but that's just physically not on the table for a lot of people. Like a lot of elbow issues. I get nerve pain when I do that or try to do that.
I can't do it. It gives me a stinger in my arm.
Yeah. So, you've got to obviously operate in some doable windows, first of all.
Do you find that some of the guys that are trying to do it, that they can't physically pivot well enough to control the left wrist? Like we've got a lot of guys coming in here with a lot of flexion that are hooking the crud out of it. And it's like, just get neutral at the top. And he's like, no,
what are you doing? What are you doing?
Right. That's right. And it's like, that's extended. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with extended, and I'll always one of Hal swings and he's slightly extended. I'm like, dude, 75% of players back then played from extended, it's okay.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that, right? So they start with that piece, and then the rotational piece that has to go with it. So you take a player like Rory, who's, I think that ESPN show that the Science of Sport or whatever it was called measured his hips as the fastest hip rotation they've ever captured. And he rotates 85 degrees in that quarter of a second of the downswing. So he's like 35 and 50 open at impact. We see guys coming in trying to do that who are 65 degrees closed in the backswing and then needing to be about 40 degrees open. So they're trying to rotate 100, 115 degrees in that same quarter of a second that Rory can only manage 85 degrees. Like the math there is not going to work out in your favor. So if you're giving yourself that big of a hurdle by doing one of those wrist actions, it's probably not going to be sustainable.
John, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we teach basically, it very much is grip dependent too, how someone's going to move their wrist. But yeah, we see too many guys coming in trying this really hard kind of motorcycle twist to the wrist. And like you said, if they don't have the body movements to go along with it, it just hits some terrible shots. So we usually just tell them it's okay. Hey, have a fairly neutral grip, make a fist at the top of the backswing with your lead hand. And that'll give you a pretty good spot for where you can play from and play some good golf from and not have to make any like Dustin Johnson-esque body movements down by the ball.
Would you guys both agree that it's less about wrist angles and more about club face anyway?
Absolutely.
yeah.
It doesn't matter what the wrist angles look like as long as the club face is overly
Club
open.
face is
Yeah.
the king in the end.
So there's a couple of things that we were taught. None of y'all, how old are you, Mike? I'm sorry.
52.
52. So you're not quite, I'm 64, but whenever I was learning how to play, I was taught to keep flexing my right knee in my backswing. I was taught that toe up to toe up was square. I was taught thumbs under the shaft at the top. Now, that was the best anybody had at the time. And y'all wouldn't teach anybody that right now.
Let's see. Yeah, it's definitely the right knee for sure. A lot of players
Thumbs
actually
under,
need the toe up. Yeah,
Thumbs under.
Thumbs under would get it pretty open, depending on the grip, wouldn't it?
That's exactly right.
Especially from
That's
a toe
exactly
up,
right.
a toe up takeaway and then thumbs under. Yeah.
That reminds me of an old training aid.
Support the shaft. That's what they said,
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just telling you, look, I overcome a lot
Yeah, he did.
as a young player.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, Boo would tell us stories that what his coach made him do, like wear a helmet and he would have a rope tied to the face mask and keep the head down. Like there's only been one Boo come out of that camp.
You can see it in his swing too.
Yeah, you really start to separate the talented golfers from the non-talented golfers.
Well, I think those people were giving us the best of what they had at the time.
Absolutely.
They didn't know. And I mean, the kids that are growing up today, they have the advantage of some definition. Really, the cameras and TrackMan and everything else has really give us some standards that are pretty gears, has give us a lot of consistent data that we can strive for.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you see that in other sports as well, right? I remember, coming up, there was one kid in our 3-county area that could dunk a basketball when he was in junior high. Now you look on Instagram, I feel like every kid 14 years old can dunk a basketball. And they learn how to jump now rather than you were either born with it or not. When I was coming up playing ball, and the information that's available to the group coming up now is such an advantage, or can be such an advantage. It can also be a disadvantage, but it can be such an advantage.
Where's the future in golf technology? What's next, do you guys think?
I mean, it looks like
Markerless.
starting to go to markerless and going towards the phones if that kind of takes off.
Mhm.
But yeah, markerless technology. Probably walk in the room, you don't need to put the suit on, and the cameras pick up the body that way.
What are you guys' thoughts on like measuring grip pressure and forces and torques in the hands?
I think it can
be
valuable.
Yeah. I think it can be valuable once it's accessible to more teachers, and we can get our hands on it and kind of test it out in lessons and do the same thing. Hey, what are the great players doing here when they put their hands on this club? And we can measure the forces and torques, and then we can apply that to other golfers and help them get better. So I think it can be really good.
The hurdle there, Chase, seems to be the buffer. Like, how much of that do you want to know as a player?
Like Hal was saying.
Yeah, like I don't, if your only job is to play, I don't know. You need almost someone kind of that, the buffer between the tech and what you actually need to work on.
I mean, we say all the time,
Part of coaching.
well, TrackMan gives 27 numbers or whatever they give. I mean, you talk about gears. We had gears for a while. I mean, you can go with the club data with gears. You can go as deep as you want to go, even the body data. So you guys have to. I mean, I told the story when I was working at my swing with the 3D stuff. We went to Colonial for to Bryson wanted to get measured, and this was Wednesday at like 7 o'clock late in the afternoon. This was like his second year on tour. He teed off at 8 that next morning, and he wanted to get suited up at 7 o'clock. I suited him up, and he wanted me to go through everything, literally 10 hours before he was going to tee off. And I'm like, I'm not doing He's like, why? And I'm like, because I'm going to mess you up so bad. He wanted everything. And that's just how, knowing now, obviously that's how his mind works, but you guys have to do the same thing with gears. And it was always interesting when Hal and I first started too. Like, he would be like, I don't think this is for, I just couldn't do all this. I'm like, yeah, but as a player, you don't need to know all this. It's one or two things, and you kind of move. That's to help the instructor side to kind of get an idea of what rock we're looking under, or where we're going to make the cut.
Right.
When I played my best, I had the least number of thoughts, and when I played my worst, I had the most thoughts going through my head. I couldn't even compartmentalize them. Where do you start? What do you end? Lost. That would be the way I would describe it. Lost in thoughts. And the best players in the world, they're not thinking. They're really not thinking about their golf swing. I don't think. Do y'all think they are?
No. The idea is to get them to that spot.
Yeah. I mean, you may have guys that have swing keys they're working on in their pre-shot routine, trying to feel something, but I would say under the gun, you're trying to reduce the amount of swing thoughts for sure.
Yeah.
Hal, what was the best? Can I ask a question to Hal?
Yeah, go ahead, Sean. Absolutely.
Hal, what was some of the swing thoughts you used when you were hitting it the best? Like when you can think back when you were just flushing it, what were some of your thoughts?
I tried to smooth the transition. I would try to go too fast with my body so that I could help my arms have some speed. And, if I could get out of transition smooth, I usually would hit the ball pretty solid. If you saw how Sutton struggled, it was usually because of trying to give it that on the downswing. So,
what was your feel at the Tour Championship with VJ?
Oh, yeah. I was really working on trying to keep the width in my thighs. My hips were getting too fast. I was trying to go too fast. I didn't have good balance. So I tried to keep the width in my thighs for balance. And I spent 2 days working on that. And I have to tell you, on Monday night, I had dinner with Fincham, and I was still on the board at the time. And he said, what do you think your chances are this week? I said, man, not good. I'm not hitting it good. And so Tuesday, and y'all know the practice range at East Lake is over a lake, and I'm trying to work on my short irons. I hit it great that week. Best I ever hit it in my life. And I was working with in my thighs.
How long did that swing thought carry on?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that was the last tournament of the year then.
Yeah.
So I had 2 months off after that. So I'm not sure it actually made it to the
First team.
champions the next year, the beginning of the next year.
It was just what you needed at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got the job done that week.
So what's the next? What new videos are coming out? What are some of the next concepts you guys are working on?
So we were doing, and this one's taken a long time to compile the data on. the next pros versus AMs is going to be on shallowing, and some kind of a common myth may not be the fairest word to use, but some of the things that we see guys trying to do to shallow it versus what we see, the best guys in the world do to shallow it. And I think that'll be an eye opener for a lot of guys out there. And then, people want to see more time of playing type videos, more kind of on course videos, actually the scoring type videos. So those are always fun to do, and kind of mix those in with the gear stuff. That's kind of where we're heading.
Can you give us a sneak peek on some of the research you found with the shallowing? Can you help our listeners out with some of them that are trying to do crazy shallowing moves that don't need it? Like what are we seeing? Give us something.
Yeah. So it's not done through external rotation in the downswing.
External of the trail shoulder.
Trail shoulder.
Right.
It's done
Okay.
through lowering the club.
Okay.
And that's seeing
all
that
we're gonna
will be
give
the
you.
big
Yeah.
eye opener.
That's it. So then,
Yeah.
is it done with some wrist angle? Is there some movement in the hands a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
It's
Oh,
low.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hands and lowering a little bit more is kind of where you guys are. What you're seeing so far?
Yeah, that lowering and straightening of the arm is the one thing that you just can't get around. You take players like, Darren Clark, for instance, like much different body style, body shape than DJ. And you're going to see roughly the same pattern with regards to how that trail arm moves compared to what we see guys
Being taught.
do, trying to hold that right arm bend, drive the elbow forward, all that. It just, when you're able to isolate those movements, it doesn't hold water as much.
Interesting. So you mentioned the shoulder, the external shoulder stuff. What patterns are you guys seeing with guys that can external a lot, like a DJ versus the Darren, and not necessarily on shallowing, but are there release pattern differences that you see? Because we do a lot of this test to see like what they're capable of. Can they smart ball it? Can they not? Stuff like that. Have you guys seen a pattern there with that range of motion issue?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it depends on how well they can turn and side bend.
Okay. Would you agree most of the guys that can't external will not have as much side, they can't side bend as much either? It kind of goes hand in hand.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard to, but the problem is the how you move the arm happens first, right? Because they're doing that at the top of the swing. So if I try to do a DJ release and get that arm and all that side bend, that I would need down at the ball, if I'm not making the prep for that out of the top, then I'm going to be in trouble down by the ball. And I think a lot of guys are just under the misconception that if I start this, throw that elbow in front, that I'll get the side bend that I need at the ball, and it's usually not the case.
Sean, thoughts?
I will say the one thing, we stopped using the smart ball for full swings.
Okay.
I'm not a fan.
For everybody?
Yeah. Yep.
Because just
This natural trail arm motion naturally will, the elbow, just what we're figuring out with gears, the elbow should spread a little bit up there.
okay. So 3/4, like shoulder height.
Fine.
Yeah, wedge work. Yeah.
Not
Absolutely.
full swings. We stopped doing it altogether. Just, it wasn't making sense.
So there's a great point right there. Y'all actually realized that it wasn't good and you went away from it. See, some people ride ideas all the way to the very end. And
Yeah.
so I had to bring that up. Sorry.
We reserve the right to get smarter. So we try to smarten ourselves up. And then, we want to help as many people as we can. So,
yeah. Well, Sean, I commend you for being able to say that immediately. We've tried things. I can't tell you how many things I tried in my golf swing that I threw to the wind because it didn't work, and I put forth a passionate effort to make it work, but it didn't work.
exactly.
So anyway,
I think, that's kind of the benefit, or one of the big benefits of being able to measure in the golf swing is you get that feedback almost immediately. And may save you 2 months of trying to do something that you scrap. You can know in 2 swings. I'd rather know that. Yeah.
right.
versus
too.
digging-
Yeah, you can
digging
say,
out of the
okay,
dirt for 6 months.
this,
I might not have
Yeah.
3 artificial joints trying to correct all the crap I worked on.
Well, you, Mike, Sean, you guys educated us today. Appreciate you guys coming on.
we got to do this again.
Big fans, love what you guys do for sure. Again, I meant what I said in the beginning. We've got all kinds of students coming in. And what'd you think of the AMG video this week? What'd you think of it? I'm like, I don't watch it because they're too good and they make me jealous. I don't like it. So no, you guys, we've been big fans of the technology and the gears and all that stuff and swing catalysts and all the tech that you guys use, and for you to bring it to the masses has been really, really awesome to watch. So I know for me, I'm very appreciative of you guys coming on. And Mike, you and I go way back. We were talking on forums when I was still in college, arguing about the golf swing. So I appreciate everything you guys do, and thanks for coming on today.
We appreciate you guys having us. This has been tough for us because do you guys ever do guest appearances on other podcasts?
Well,
Yeah.
Hal does a lot. I've done
We
a
got to
couple.
have you on ours.
Yeah, we'd like to
Yeah, we
have you
gotta
on because
get
there's a
that.
million questions I'd want to ask you guys. So that would be a lot of fun.
Well, thanks guys for coming on. We appreciate it. Sean, it's good to see you again, buddy.
Oh man, always good to see you. We'll catch up again.
Thank you guys. We'll see you next
Appreciate
time.
it, fellas. Thanks again.
Be the right club. Be the right club today. Yes!